welcome back to the channel, everyone. The first product review I am doing. Thanks for all your support so far as well. Keep liking the videos and sharing. It's certainly fun making them, but normally I'm on the bike. But due to me waiting for a part for my bottom bracket, I am out of action for at least another day. So thought I'd take this opportunity to do the review that I've been wanting to do for ages against one of the most talked about topics that's hard to get an answer on, and that is round versus oval chainrings. Where are we? Round and oval. In more particular, osymmetric, but we'll touch base on a few different sorts. Now, this is going to be far from, I guess, a fully scientific type review, but every review that you see on the internet, YouTube, anything you read, there's always half of them telling you that oval chain rings are good for you or there's a benefit, and the other half is not. It's just so divided, and I'm here to tell you that I really think that there's such a unique piece of equipment that there's no right and wrong answer. You need to try them for yourself and see if they work. So basically they're either going to feel good or they're not, and they're either going to work for you or they're not. So it's hopefully you get two positives there, but it's not guaranteed. They might feel great, but you see no benefit, and it could be the opposite. You see something that you like there, your numbers might be a little bit better, but they just feel horrible. So unfortunately, there's something that you're honestly going to have to try, and there's no one can answer that for you. But basically, I'm just going to run through. I've got a piece of paper here with some stuff written down that I really want to get through and talk to you about. I'm going to run through what the company promotes that the rings will do for you. I want to run through the equipment I use, because that's is as scientific as I can get, unfortunately. So we'll run through that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and my background so you can understand why I'm seeing and saying the things that I am. We'll run through the pros and cons of the chain rings. Then we're going to jump into, where is it? Up here, my zwiftpower. And I'm going to show you some very interesting data that you don't get to see in any other videos or reviews of these chain rings, and I think I know why, and we're going to get to that. Then I'll end up telling you a few interesting things that I've discovered using and testing these rings, and then we'll just end off with my final thoughts. But basically, I will say that a few years ago, about two and a half years ago, I tried some Q rings, rotor Q rings. These are obviously no Q, but the rotor Q rings I used, there was really no noticeable difference. I was using on a SRAM E-tap setup at the time. I had a few chain drops. That was purely just lack of setting up. They were so rare in between, I didn't even worry about trying to adjust it, but no real difference. Didn't notice much. But that is also the first step in going to an oval chainring. There's not much ovality in them. I think it's only something like 10%. So, but anyway, Osymetrics. The company promotes 10% more power and 10% less lactic acid, and this is aimed at your threshold pace. So let me start off straight away, and I've got the numbers that we'll go through shortly in the zwiftpower, but 10% more power, absolutely not. You are not going to put these chain rings on and see 10% more wattage, even if you're thinking and you've heard about inflation in certain power meters. If your threshold's 300 watts and you think you're going to put these on and say 330, you are dreaming. Not going to happen. So that's not correct to start with. You will not see extra power to start with. I will get to that in my conclusions when we're going through the zwiftpower. So that's a negative. You're not going to see any increase in power. Less lactic acid. I don't know what 10% less lactic acid feels like, but I certainly felt after putting them on and getting a little bit used to them that I could hold a threshold or a VO2 workout a little bit longer. The, um, how you measure 10% without being in the lab, you can't, I guess. But I certainly felt I could hold a little bit more. But I was also concerned was that inflation that you hear about, and was I actually riding at less watts, and that's the reason I could hold it longer. Hence the reason we've done testing and we've got the numbers that we'll go through soon. There's also talk of oval chain rings. Osymetric don't claim this, but other ones do, of less oxygen for the same wattage. I'm going to say I am a bit of a believer in that if the less oxygen means lower heart rate. So once again, I'm just going through what they claim at the moment, and we'll get into the data shortly. The other thing you obviously hear about too is some crank-based power meters see inflation. We're going to go through what I seen when I first put them on, and now that I'm a little bit more used to them, and show the difference between the round and the ovals there, because we use the kicker as a control. So all good. So a little bit about me, just so you understand. So I've been riding a bike for 40 years, racing on and off for 38 of those. Obviously had a break to have family and that sort of thing. But my background certainly has come from track sprinter. So spent most of my life training for races between 200 meters and 2000 meters. That's in 2 kilometers long. That was all I ever worried about. And it's always wanted to be better on road, but was always better on track. Fairly short and stocky. I'm 169 centimeters, 72 kilos or so at the moment. Just little tree trunk legs basically, so a bit more of a sprinter, but always wanted to be better on road. And it's only since COVID hit and I've gone indoors. I actually started training indoors probably mid 2019 when I got my first kicker indoor trainer, and have done some indoor riding since then. And then obviously COVID hit and I was fully indoors. So, and that's when I've started to work on sort of threshold. The only time I've had a power meter as well since, so the last 2.5 years. But have done a lot of structured workouts and training under numerous coaches over the last 20 years, on and off with a few different people. So not new to hard training, that's for sure, but power meter and seeing all this data in front of me, really, the last 2.5 years has been really good to see the numbers and what I'm producing. So now I will say, with some of the things that I see in these Swift Power that we're going to go through, I might be jumping the gun a little bit here, but pedaling efficiency. So whether or not I am more efficient than some people out there, I don't know, but I can tell you that over the last 20 years of being on and off with different coaches, I can say I've literally spent hundreds of hours mentally and physically working on my pedaling technique. So from the push to the pull to over the top to through the bottom. So whether or not I'm any better myself, I don't know. Whether I'm better than others, I don't know. All I know is I've spent a lot of time working on my pedaling technique. So that may have something to do with the numbers that we look at shortly. And for easily the last 20 years, I recorded a lot of metrics. So I know my body really well. I know when I'm sick, when I'm overtraining, undertraining, how I'm recovering. There's just so many metrics that I collect all the time. So I know what's going on with my body and when I see changes. So that I feel comfortable and confident in giving you the data that I'm about to do. So with that, equipment, I use a Wahoo Kicker 18. So it's a version 4, and that's plus or minus 2% accuracy. We've got a Quark D0 power meter up front, a crank-based power meter, and that's good for plus or minus 1.5% accuracy. And just talking about percentages, because what we're going to do is jump in to my Zwift Power shortly and have a look at some dual recordings. And I just want to touch base on another thing that you may not necessarily take, will not make as important as what you probably should, unless you are you race a lot, is drivetrain efficiency. When it comes to your chain, I'm not going to put any links, but I've just done some quick researches on drivetrain efficiency, and there was one study, heap of different chains, was done indoors, controlled at 250 watts, and the very best chains that you could buy with the best lubes were still about 4 watts of drivetrain efficiency from new. And then you had your mediocre chains, which everyday chains that probably most of us are using, were as like 6 or 7 watts drivetrain loss. And the study actually went as far as to say that even after as little as 1 use, your chain can lose another 1 watt. I honestly thought they would wear in, but you can lose, I suppose it depends on dirt or the conditions that it's in. If your chain's really dirty, then you're going to lose heaps. But after as little as one use, your chain can lose another watt. And as little as 1% wear on your chain will cause another 2 watts of loss. So it's almost safe to say, like the chains I use, probably $60, $70, $80, give or take, around there. I change my chain 2 to 3 times a year. But it's safe to say that if you've spent probably under $100 for your chain, it's been on your bike for 2 or 3 months, and you haven't cleaned or given it a good lube for a while, you're probably easily losing 10 watts at 250 watts. So that's 4%. Now, I just say that because when we look at some of the data, it's all about percentages. When you're combining the 2 power meters, you would have seen GP Llama and DC Rainmaker. They do a lot of these sort of things. So I'm only using what I've got here, but yeah, if you haven't given your chain a really good clean and a good lube, do yourself a favor and you'll see much better numbers. Rightio. Pros and cons. Let's just touch base on some of these before we jump into the numbers. The pros for an osymmetric chainring, I think when you get past that choppy feeling just to start with, it's only going to take you like an hour of riding or two to feel normal. It's not going to feel, it doesn't feel choppy after your legs get used to it. It just feels like a normal chainring. But I believe that there's a sense of power, especially if you're fresh. You just feel like you're pushing a bigger gear than what you normally would, and in a way you are, because you of the way it goes up and down. It's sort of a larger chainring through the power phase and smaller through the dead spots. For me, when I first put the Osymetrics on, my recovery was through the roof, as in I could do 2 or 3 days of hard training, where on round rings I would not be able to do as many hard days. That's not the same now. Like I've adapted so much that when I'm pushing myself, I still need to have my recovery days, but the sensation when I first put them on was I could do more hard days than I could on round rings to start with. So was that beneficial or not? We'll get to the numbers. The less lactic acid, yeah, I feel as though I could push a little bit longer through, especially the VO2s where I was really redlining. And I've found that my max heart rate, believe it or not, is a little bit lower. And I'll show you those in the workouts coming up shortly. So there's some of the pros. That's not a bad thing. I certainly noticed muscle isolation too. I will say after the first interval that I'd done on Osymetric chainrings, after I got used to them, I'd done a VO2 workout, and I've got to tell you, the next day, even though I say my recovery is good and my muscle soreness was down, the very next day after my first big workout on them, I felt my glutes and my quads isolated. They were sorer than everything else. So whether it's positive or not, it certainly isolates or uses the muscles differently anyway. Cons, noisy. They're noisy. Not bad in the big chainring. On the little chainring, they're just noisy, especially indoors on a setup. Outside, you got your rubber, I suppose. It's rubber connected to the road with your tyres, so it's not too bad, but they're noisy. I love a silent drivetrain. So that's one of the most biggest drawbacks for me. I don't like the noise. Now, I can change between, there's a lot to talk about the gearing and the setup and how difficult it is. I can change between asymmetric and round in in a matter of minutes, the setup, and I have flawless shifting. So I would rank this as 97, 98% of round rings. Like, I can get the setup perfect, but I don't put any of the spaces or anything extra that Osymetric says should put in. And therefore, on the small chainring and the largest 2 cogs, I have chain rub. Now, I'm not against that chain rub because it is so, when the chainring goes flat, I haven't got the small chainring, sorry, but when the chainring goes flat, the angle of the chain, it comes down so much that I almost would worry that it was going to come off the flat part of the chainring before, and as I started to come up again, that my chain would just completely drop off. So I actually feel comfortable in those higher cogs that I'm rarely ever in to be on the derailleur, because if I ever go into those gears, I'm on it for a very short time because I just don't have the hills where I am, and at least I know the chain's straight and it's going to sit back down on the small chainring. So it's only the top few cogs, but something to be aware of. So that adds more noise. So the noise is not good. Some people might see inflation, and everyone says, every review you see is that power meters, crank-based power meters, are going to inflate your power numbers. Now, you've got the kingpins of power meters that are SRM that say no, as long as your power meter's being calibrated with round ring, torque is torque, as they say, and whatever you're applying is going to be, that's the numbers you're putting out. Then you've got lots of other ones that say no, that it's the angular velocity by the force being applied, and it's going to inflate. The normal number that is quoted is 2.7 to 3.5% inflation in your power numbers. I'm assuming that's at threshold. That's what all those numbers that I'm talking about is normally threshold. That's where Osymetrics or oval rings will come into play, really, anyway. And sprint power, I can't, there's been lots of studies that say sprint power has increased because all your other numbers are meant to increase. I certainly haven't been able to put out my best numbers on Osymetrics, as in my high-end sprint. I've gotten close, like it's close, but my indoor watts are way down from my outdoor watts anyway, but all my best highest end sprints are on round rings. So anyway, with that, we are going to jump over into my Zwift power account. Sorry, I'm going to go into our analysis tool. So this is just like a dual recording power tool that I've used. Now I just want to run through some really interesting numbers here, and some of this data goes back long before I ever thought about doing this review. So I can only run through with what I've got, but all right, let's go into this now. So I'll just go down to the last FTP test that I done on round rings that I'm aware of, that I've dual recorded. We're just going to open this up in a separate window, so we're always on the data that we're looking at is going to be current to the one we clicked on. We don't want to get too many tabs open. So okay, so basically it gives us a bit of an analysis there, heart rate, cadence. But down here, this is the good stuff here we want to look at. So here it is, we're within 3%. So this is the Wahoo Kicker and the D0 round rings doing an FTP test back in February. So let's have a look here. 326 watts on round rings. So 95% of that, I think, is what, that's 309, I think, from memory. So, but this is the bit that we want to look at here. We're all within 3%. Now keep in mind, I can be up to 3.5% out with because my kick is 2% plus or minus, and my D0 is 1.5%. So I could be up to 3.5% out before any drivetrain loss, which we've already said is going to be, could be a couple of percent. So this is really sweet. This is a good number. You know, it's only when you probably start to go over 5%. I think Zwift Insider had something like 3 to 5% is pretty much what's expected to be seen, because you're going to have some drivetrain loss. So when you got 1 and 2s and or 0%, you're right on the money. It's you've got a really good setup. Should say with the drivetrain efficiency too, as we're talking about any cross chaining, like if you're on a high cogs in a big chainring and a large cog, even that is going to add watts. So anyway, we're pretty happy with that. That's not too bad. And just keep in mind, because I want to refer back to this number shortly. So that is an FTP test. And it's worth noting that up until sort of now and early in the year, late last year and early this year, like I was pretty on a plateau. Like I was always around that 300 to 320. So anyway, we're happy with that. That's good numbers. Now let's just have a look here. I know I got my Osymetric chainrings. First set that I got, I ordered on the 16th of Feb and got delivered on the 20th. So that was our first ride. Let's have one last quick look. This is the last little hit out because we had a few easy ones here. That's just rolling along. So some leg openers, just another little bit of a hit out. Have a look. Once again, 3s, 2s, 1s. So all well and surely what I expect with my equipment. So that's all good. Now, I take delivery. I may put it up. I don't know if you really need to see my eBay account, but you can just take my word for it. Taking some screenshots and I'll put it up. This here is the day I've got my Osymetric chainrings. So let's open this up. This is the very first ride on them. Not even used to them, so I'm still doing trying to get used to it. But I just want you to understand this is what people can see on when we talk about inflation. Look at those numbers. That is off the charts. That is unbelievable. And at this point, when I did my first ride on them and I've looked at that, I've gone, I just may not be able to use these because I want to race on Zwift and I need to have numbers that I can validate as being legit. And so that had me worried. But once again, wasn't used of the power, like the power phase and then the dead spot. So I was still very choppy during this one. But just take note, we're at 6s, 7s and 8s. 1.5 there, but all 6s, 7s and 8s. Now, that's on the 20th. On the 26th, we thought we'd do another little test. So this is exactly, keep in mind, we done a test on the 6th. This is only 20 days later. We do a test on some Osymetrics. So this is after about a week of riding them. Here we go. Actually, I've got it there. First test on Osymetrics. And so we come down here and we're like, whoa, still pretty out of it. But we're at 5s and 6s now, not 6, 7s and 8s. So this is where I think a lot of tests go wrong. Pedaling efficiency. As I said, I've spent a lot of time on my pedaling, but also there's a learning phase. You cannot put test subjects on these rings for a day or two and take the information and the data out and then deliver it to the public as yes or no. This is why every second review you read is the opposite to the one you read prior. So I am definitely more efficient after a week of riding. But also I want to note, 330. So remember my last one was 326. This is what I'm telling you. When you put these on and you expect to see massive power gains, they're not. That's not there when you put these on. You need to understand that. So 326 to 330. The other one was 314. I'm not sure if you noticed. So 311. So look, the 7 watts difference between the high and the low is certainly added. That's what's caused the inflation here. 7 watts is not necessarily noticeable when you're on your threshold. 7 watts is amazing if you can find it, but look, for the sake of things, 326, 330, it's here nor there. There's no, it's not life changing. I'm not a different rider putting these rings on. Okay. Now, I must admit, after that test, that was still way too crazy for me, and I thought I can't race on Zwift with those numbers. It's just too big, too great of a difference. So I didn't feel comfortable, so they come off. I went back to round, and it was on round for ages until I got to the point where I thought I'm honestly going to give I like the feeling of the ring, so I thought might race for a bit. I'm just going to get on there, use them, enjoy them, train, see what it goes, see if I like them, and can get some data together to do a review. This is why now I started to think about doing a video for people. But I didn't like the size. The 52 felt too big for me. I'd like to be on top of a gear, so I did two things. I ordered a 50-tooth Osymetric, and I also ordered another cassette, 1428. So that's my Zwift setup. I like to be down towards the bottom of the cassette and just have one gear jumps. So basically, I took delivery of my 50-tooth on the 1st of July. So that's my last ride. So this is where I started to, so I had all of July, all of August, and part of September getting used to the rings. This is riding asymmetric chain rings all the time. And now this is where I want to show you what other videos do not show you. So once again, I'll keep touching base. I've always worked on my pedaling, but now after 2.5 months of solid riding on Osymetrics, I want you to have a look at those numbers. So I started off at 6s, 7s and 8s, then I went to 5s and 6s, and then I'm down to 3s, a lot of 3s, there's a 4 there, but like that's acceptable. Threes are acceptable. Like that's what I was racing on in round rings. That is the same round rings. But I also want to note one special thing here. Remember at the start I said 10% more power. I said, but not at the, like I said, you won't see that. And I showed you I went 326 to 330 after riding on them for a week. So this is after putting them on in the start of July and training solid for 2.5 months on them. Now, that's not an FTP test. That's an FTP interval. That is my FTP. So I can, and the first one, the last one I did on round rings was 326, all out effort. So 95% of that, 309. And now this is my FTP, and that's just an effort that I was doing, an FTP interval. So my FTP has gone up 40 watts since I've gone to asymmetric chain rings. And if you want to be real picky, so I tested, when I first put these on, I tested at 330. So if you want to take any kind of inflation right out of the equation, I tested at 330 the first time I put them on, and now my FTP is equivalent to 370. So it's 40 watts. That's a lot, considering that I was on a plateau for ages and ages. Then I go into that. There was a steady state. Let's have a look here. This is a race, so a lot more jerky, power on, power off, sort of drafting, that sort of thing. Let's go down here. So we're at 4s. Okay, so just inside what I class as acceptable to race on, pretty much. That's pretty good. So what do we got here? So yeah, that's it's acceptable. I'd have no worries in racing at that. Considering that a lot of people out there are going to have 4%. If you're at 250 watts and you've got just your chains not right, you're going to be, you're going to lose 10 watts is 4% there. So it's like to be at this sort of wattage, and that percentage is acceptable. Now, just for some fun, I put on the round rings again, just to see how I would go. I'm just got to see which ones it is. I certainly know I did a short one there, and I'll open up that one as well, but let's go here. So this is definitely back to round rings. So this is looking pretty good. And if you go down here, so I must admit, a shade more accurate. We're in the 2s, 1s, 3s, so a percent. We're a percent better. A little bit less wattage too, and it wasn't a super long ride. And the reason for that is because I was struggling, because I was back on round rings trying to do like decent kind of, a little bit decent wattage, but the muscles just weren't used of the round rings, and I was paying the price. Here's another one I did on 2x15 sweet spot. This is a good one. Now here, all 2%, so everything's been back to round rings. So it's safe to say on round rings, I usually sit at around 2 to 3% drivetrain loss, and on osymmetrics, I am anywhere from 2 to 4. So I can be nothing or up to possibly maybe 1% difference. So, you're talking 1%. So at my threshold, which is 350, I'll go back here. I won't go back to the profile at the moment. So my FTP is 350, 1%, 3.5 watts. Like, I'm happy with that. Like, if you want to call that inflation, but I don't see anywhere near the 2.7 to 3.5 that is classed as genuine power inflation. Just don't see it. And I honestly think it's because I work on the pedal stroke, which happens naturally for me now, but I've done it hundreds of hours of working on that, whether it's just in my mind doing it or whether I'm actually doing a drill that requires me to physically work on it. But between that and getting used to the rings, I just don't know how all these other studies that say there's always inflation, how long have people been able to use the rings for? And how long has the study gone for? Clearly not 2.5 months of solid use, I wouldn't think, because it's I don't believe people would see all that inflation. So, and this is the last one I tried to do a couple of days ago, and I just had to stop because I couldn't turn the pedals at the wattage I needed to, because I am so adapted to the different rings, just engaging different muscles. Now, I will admit that going from round rings over to osymetrics is far easier than going back once you're used to it. So the people that have some on some bike and some on another, just so I'm not getting confused, I'm talking about when you're riding at your limit. I could jump on any bike and ride any bike with any chainring, but when your muscles and you're pushing yourself to the limit, so if you have a look at any of my other videos on this YouTube channel, like, I do lots of VO2 and threshold work. So whether my numbers look good to you or not, I ride until the lights go out. Like, I push myself to the limits all the time. So you need to be doing that to see the benefits of these rings. Otherwise, you're not really gonna see any benefits. But when you try to go back, so this is a really light ride, sorry, done on osymetrics. There you go. I used to find the less pressure on the pedals, the more you feel the chop. You certainly do on the little ring. But there's, once again, that's a really light done on osymetrics. Yep. Like, so I don't have the inflation. I don't have the inflation that lots of other people see now. And look, I just wanted to share that with you. Like, I get so, I read so many reviews on round rings versus oval rings, rotors, osymetrics, you name it, all the sorts, and I just can never get a solid answer. And I've tried it, and I use them, and I like it. They've let me perform better, but not to start with. You really got to dedicate your time to them. And do the pros outweigh the cons? I don't know. I've got to say, it's the noisy drivetrain irritates me. Doesn't matter how well lubed and new your chain is, you're always going to have that noise, and it's just, especially on a small chainring, and it's just irritating. But so the things that I've really noticed, let's just try and wrap this up so I'm not boring you too much. So my FTP, I've been able to increase it, and that's take all the inflation you want out of it from when I first put them on to now. My FTP has been able to go up. And I think that just is because whether it's, I'm only like short, so whether it's my hip flexors and everything, it doesn't, I think I just can recover better. It isolates the muscles. I don't have any other joint issues, not that I ever really did, but certainly I'm able to push a bit harder, a bit more often. The other things that I found that's really interesting. So that 10% I find is interesting because you don't get it at the start, but you do. I have seen 10%. Like I'm 40 watts up, and at 350 watts, that's just over 10%. So I'll say yes to that. The lactic acid, I'll say it still hurts. Push as hard as you can, but yep, I'm able to hold on usually just that little bit longer. I don't know how to measure that. I haven't done it in minutes or as in wattages, or just I can hold a little bit longer. The other two really interesting things that I want to touch base on is my maximum heart rate has dropped. So the highest I've ever seen since I've been riding indoors is 197. I think that might have been, that's pushing it. I've seen 194, 5 and 6 a lot, but 197 was in one of my workouts. Now, the highest I've seen since I've been on Osymetrics is 190. That was at the end of a race the other day, that one we looked at. This one up here. Now, I've got to say, I don't know if I've got another one or not. The most I've ever seen training is 188. Now, to me, it doesn't make sense because if I'm pushing my body to the limit, then I know I've got another 4 or 5, 6 beats there, like 8 beats. Like I should be able to push harder, but I can't. Like I'm at my limit. The legs are shutting down. I'm starting to see stars. I've got to pull the pin. I can't go any harder. Yet my heart rate just doesn't ever get into the 190s like it used to. So I can't explain that. It's like when I was talking, is it less oxygen, the same power? To me, then I should be able to put out more power and go up to the body's limit. But that's just something that I've experienced that I can't explain. Another thing is saddle soreness and saddle discomfort from indoors. So as I said, I've been riding on and off for 40 years, and only ever since I came inside throughout 2019 have I ever experienced saddle discomfort and soreness. Now, clearly, it's from not having the movement in the bike, and also extra sweat, all that sort of stuff. You can have all the fans you want. It's just not the same. Okay, so I kid you not, from December 2019 through until mid this year, I have suffered with some form of being uncomfortable on the saddle. I've tried different saddles, different positions, different saddle heights, different cleat positions, you name it. Now, I'm someone that can set their bike up just from feel in a heartbeat. Like I have my position and I know it well, but I've suffered so much over the 2.5 years with being uncomfortable. And I must admit, Osymetric rings on, nothing at all. No discomfort until I just realised one day after probably using them for a few weeks that it wasn't there anymore. I could just gone. Can't explain it. When I put the round rings back on within the last week, I could feel it coming back, almost like a hot spot. I could feel exactly where I was going to have some discomfort again straight away, within 2 or 3 days of using them and being on the bike for like an hour or more. And so that probably alone is, I can't explain it, but look, is it just the friction from where I'm resting on the saddle through the high, the top dead center, bottom dead center? Like, is it something? I can't explain it. So that's another thing. The heart rate I can't explain. The saddle soreness can't explain, but they are there and they are present. So 2 things definitely worth noting. Now, I'll just end the video now. I look forward to your comments, and by all means, throw questions at me. Share this video. Please share the video, because I want everyone to know that what you're seeing out there about oval chain rings is not necessarily what you will experience. They are unfortunately expensive. I don't know if you've got friends that's going to lend them to you or not, but you won't know unless you try them. Do the cons outweigh the pros? I don't know. Unless you're, like, my final conclusion would be, unless you are riding on your limit for threshold and VO2 work, no, not worth it. I would take the silent drivetrain alone over that. As soon as I'm not pushing myself to the limits anymore, I will be back on round, unless my joints don't allow it and I need to stay on that for whatever reason. If they are beneficial and I'm outdoors, you cannot beat silent, smooth shifting drivetrain where all the gears work flawlessly. It's just I rate that so high, and I certainly don't have that with these, but I feel as though I can push myself a little bit more. So, but yeah, if you're gonna have a go, you've got to put it on yourself, have a look, do a ride, get the data at the start, compare it to the round rings. I've certainly become much more efficient on them, as in I do higher wattages at lower heart rates well, my threshold heart rate hasn't changed, but my max has. But I just don't have that discomfort that I used to have. I perform better. I'm certainly a fan, but only at threshold and VO2. Lower than that, when there's no resistance on the pedals, I can feel the choppiness. And sprinting, I don't put out as many watts. So for time trialists, triathletes, all that sort of stuff, really good. I enjoy training more than racing on Zwift. So although I have no worries at all now in using these because of the numbers that I've shown you there, and I update that all the time, so I feel comfortable and confident in using them and without having any kind of inflation advantage. But yeah, they're just not quite the same, but as a quite smooth drivetrain with a brand new chain. So totally up to you with what you want to do, but please don't be put off and by the reviews that you see. Hopefully some of the people that's done those reviews might reach out, and I'm more than happy to share the data I've got with them. But yeah, it's not all clear cut. You can't just put subjects on these chain rings for a few days or a day and tell them to go all out and just see what happens. You've got to become accustomed to them. And if you've already, like I said, if you've already worked on your pedal stroke and then you become accustomed to them, it comes down to basically on some rides there's no inflation. So anyway, I'll leave it there. Give me your feedback. Tell me what your thoughts are. Please share the video, because I think it's going to help someone. Someone out there will try these rings just because of this video, and it could really work wonders for them. So, all right, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much. Enjoy, and we'll catch you next time.